Thank you very much indeed, Adam, and for your kind welcome. It reminds me of an occasion a few years ago when I was Secretary of State for Transport, where the person presiding introduced me and went through all the jobs I'd held, and he said, "We very much hope that this will be Mr. Darling's last job." I think he was trying to be nice, but if he wasn't, well, he's been bitterly disappointed because here I am some years later. What I wanted to do was to allow as much of this session as possible for you to put questions or to put your comments, because frankly I think I would learn more from that, because sometimes the very act of asking a question itself reveals what your concerns are or what your hopes are, and I find that much more useful. But I thought it might be helpful if I could just perhaps outline where I think we are at the moment, and also why I think that today's conference is so important. Because, of course, we are meeting at a time when there is very understandable concern about jobs in the North East, particularly in relation to the steel industry. But we also meet at a time when I think there are grounds for being more confident than we might have been 12 months ago. Now, this conference is about the future. It's about what we can do to develop more and exploit more of the low-carbon industries, which I think is an example of where you're seeing a transition in the North East of going from the traditional heavy industries to the fact that we are able to capitalize on new technologies, new opportunities. There is a well of skill here, of dedication, of innovation. And you've no doubt been hearing of examples of that today, and my colleague Ed Miliband, the Energy Secretary, is about to speak to you. But I think there are many, many examples of where we can be confident that because of the ingenuity and skills level here, we can get the new industries that will make the difference to us having jobs in the future. I've just come from Thorn Electronics, the plant at Spennymoor. And what's impressive about that factory, well, there's a number of impressive things, actually. One is that quite easily that new factory could have been built somewhere in Eastern Europe or another part of the world, but instead the people who own Thorn decided that they would stick here, they would put new investment in, and I was hearing today that some of the work at that factory has actually been repatriated from the Far East to here in the North East. And it's an example of how we can still do things well, where the reputation of the workforce for the skills and the excellence has meant that work has come back. And they were also showing me how, with the new technologies that are coming up, they can revolutionize the whole concept of how you light factories and shops and public places. And that's it illustrates to me how much there is in perhaps areas that people don't talk about, they're not so knowledgeable about, because it's not quite so obvious as a large plant, but it's an example of where we can capitalize on the knowledge that we've got. Now, I think that's important, because at a time like this, when we're coming through what has undoubtedly been the deepest downturn in modern times, and whereas there are encouraging signs in this country and other countries throughout the world that the economy is coming through recession, and we're starting to see growth in different parts of the world, it's very important that we capitalize on the new opportunities available to us. Because the risk is that you can come through recession, but you end up with a decade of low aspiration, of low employment, low growth. Or, provided governments do what they should be doing, that isn't standing in the place of entrepreneurs but supporting entrepreneurial activity, then provided governments do that right across the world, then I think there is a far better chance of getting a higher level of growth than you would otherwise see. And of course that growth will bring jobs, it'll bring the opportunities that everybody wants. And that's particularly important in an area like the North East, where we've got to make sure that we can stimulate private enterprise, private endeavour to go alongside the public sector. That is very, very important. So I'm more confident, certainly more confident than I would have been if I was speaking to you 12 or 18 months ago, that we, other countries, are coming through this. But we are not out of the woods yet. That's why I believe so strongly that we've got to maintain support for our economy now until we ensure that the recovery is established. then of course we've got to reduce the amount of borrowing. Public spending will be tighter than it has been in the past. But at the same time, the emphasis must be, and this will be the emphasis in my budget in a few weeks' time, to ensure that we support measures that will bring about growth, that will help businesses, that will help people get that additional growth that this country and other countries really need over the next few years to come. So supporting the economy now, making sure then we reduce the deficit, making sure also that we get long-term sustainable growth must be absolutely essential, which is why this conference today is so important. I know there are many initiatives and there are many things that are being done, announcements being made today in relation to wind turbines and so on. They will all help, but it does need government to be active, government to play its part in standing alongside the private sector, because, frankly, the work that we need to do in renewing our energy supplies won't happen unless public and private sector are working together. The work we need to do to exploit the new technologies needs both the public sector and the private sector working closer together. And I'm absolutely determined that that will happen. Growth is essential to our future, and we will only get growth if we recognise that government clearly has a role to play. Step back, abandon that role, and the path will be so much more difficult than it need be. Now, as I said, I'm confident about our future, but we are, in some ways, at a fairly pivotal stage. We've got to ensure that we harness the same enthusiasm, the same effort that we had avoiding what could have been a catastrophic series of events 12 or 18 months ago. We've got that same energy is needed now to make sure that we get the long-term growth, so that we enter a decade where people can be confident about the future, confident about jobs, and therefore about our standard of living and about our prosperity. So, Adam, that's all I wanted to say by way of introduction. Do I now come and sit next to you?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Right.